it's always puzzled me, influence and how people get influenced, and I think that a lot of the system is rigged or fixed. I think that there there's a certain element of what works and what's true out there. I also think that there's a lot of control within that environment as well. I don't know. It influence has always interested me because I've never had that great an influence over people through social media, and I'm always interested in how people react and respond to things. It's always different from how I think. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, like I put out a
Okay.
post. I put out a little
Uh-huh.
post yesterday about this. There's this virtual reality game called Moss, where it's a nice little game where you follow a mouse in a virtual world and solve certain puzzles. And I put on. I recorded a bit of the gameplay and I put it on this website for people who have this system and play similar games. And I titled it "Nice Game for Kids." And all the comments underneath were, "He must be being ironic."
Oh.
Yeah, and long threads of discussions about how is this really a good game for kids and blah 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 blah. And I was just like, well, I just wanted to share that I thought other parents might like their kids to play this game because it's kind of really interesting. And
Hmm.
everybody took it as completely the opposite.
Wow.
Everyone thought I was being ironic and that I was attacking this game as something else, and that's just I find that all quite bizarre. But then you realize that they're taking it from their own place of negativity. They
Hmm.
see it as negative because that's all that they know. They believe that it's negative because they've never seen any they've never this is so key. They've never seen anyone in their life take their own money and use it to help people
Hmm.
on a consistent basis, not virtue signaling.
Yeah.
It's not
What
about
kind of life you
me.
must have
Yeah.
had?
What kind of upbringing do these people have
Mm.
where they're not able to recognize good?
Mm.
They're not able to recognize it, which circles us back to the earlier part of the conversation where I talked about self-assessment and being able to see the difference between good and bad and right and wrong, and not everything is okay.
Hmm. Mm.
You need to fail. Not everything is okay. And people like it, the number of people who have taken me to one side and said, "And who's paying for all this? And how are they? Who's paying for it? And why are they doing it?" I'm like,
Uh-huh.
"I'm paying for it. I'm paying. It's like there's no magical, mysterious source of funding that I've received in order to help people. I just decided to help people. But why
Mm.
are you doing it?" I'm like, "You really have to ask me?" And this tells me that they've never in their life encountered real virtue.
Hmm.
Adults running businesses who have never encountered real virtue because you have to do something for something,
Yes
right?
and no.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, I know. I get the answer. Yeah, it's like you need. It's like we live on an economic planet, so it makes sense to run things from an economic principle. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that that's the only way, and it doesn't mean that you can't help people if you want to help people. And it's so the the fact that people don't it doesn't register in people's brains
Mm.
is is quite it's quite astounding. And the fact that somebody with very little finance and very little resources is able to do more than
Yeah.
everyone else with infinite resources put together,
Yeah.
again highlights the importance of the individual person in everything. Yeah, as much as I just said earlier that a lot of things, socially are controlled, it's still, one person can make a difference. One person can make a huge difference. And as somebody pointed out to me a while ago, that the entire history of the Western world is based on the work of about 100 people. There are about 100 scientific discoveries that have changed the world over the last 200 to 300 years.
Yeah.
Each,
How we've got here or something. It's a book about, I guess, 6 discoveries
yeah,
that
yeah,
we're
yeah.
going through.
And there's you can reduce it if you want to be like, super specific, you can reduce it to about 10 and say that if these 10 things were not discovered or invented, we'd still be living in caves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these 10 things were created by 10 individuals who had the original idea, and then it was taken and developed by other people. But we're still running our society on those basic principles. So if these 10, you can go and say 100 people hadn't lived, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Right? That's such a wild realization, and I I think it points to the importance of limitlessness and believing that, or knowing even more than believing, knowing, because knowledge and belief are very often in conflict with each other. So,
Feeling and knowing. Mm-hmm.
well, knowledge and belief, because a fact is a fact. That's your knowledge.
But
A
how many
fact is a
times you
fact.
have to have believed in?
Well,
Sorry.
the belief the belief is a quality of the human imagination.
Mm.
Knowledge is an experience of the senses. They are, again, the holistic principles. They are two sides. For that which is real, you also need that which is unreal.
Unreal.
It either exists or it does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if you believe that it exists, it still does not mean that it exists. They're two different things. But belief is still important, because that's the imagination that drives the future. Yes. So if you belief is based on experience, and the experience must be positive for belief to have a positive effect. The experience must be positive, because we go towards what we know. That we seek dark places. If certain people seek dark places because they are comfortable there, because that's all that they know. Depression is a place of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of depressed people, it's a place of comfort. Why do people spend a lot of time depressed? Because it's actually psychologically a comfortable place for them to be.
Mm.
because it's what they know. They know who they are when they're in that state, and they're afraid of who they could become because they don't know how to control the darker elements of their own personality. We build the prison for ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes. The door to lock it in, or. Mhm.
Yeah. Understanding suffering is, we build the prison for ourselves. The gulags in Russia were run by the inmates.
Mhm.
Right, so the prisoners run the prisons. Right, so of the many voices that people have in their head based on their experiences, first of all, I think one voice is their own true voice. But the many voices are the voices of other people telling them what to do and how to think and where to go. And when we're not comfortable with listening to our own voice, we live by other people's rules and judgments, and we stick to what it is that we know because we haven't experienced anything else. Depression is no more than a language.
Mhm.
Like Japanese or Spanish. It's another way to communicate our experience.
Mhm.
So depressed people will communicate using depressed words. They will have depressed thoughts. And it's because this is what they know. Like if you grow up in Japan, you have to understand that Japanese is not the only language in the world. And that if you want to reach out and experience other things, you've got to speak other languages.
Mhm.
And depression is as much a language as it is anything else. It's an
I like this point. Mhm.
it's a okay. So see, my problem is not with depressed people because depressed people know they're depressed. My problem is why do you want to spend time with depressed people? See, okay, the question would be not okay. So person
Yeah.
person X says my partner is depressed. Why the fuck would you want to spend your life with a depressed person? Because I love them. Yes, but they don't love themselves, and that's a waste of your energy.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, what could be more downward spiraling than loving a person who doesn't love themselves? It didn't break it.
Yes.
It didn't break at the end. It was broken at the beginning.
Mhm.
It's just like, oh, and then we broke up. No, you were broken before it began. You just you just didn't realize, and then you wasted your time, and you can't come to terms with the fact that you wasted your time. So you use this language to make it seem like it's all okay. The bigger question is not why is that other person depressed, it's why do you want to spend your time with a depressed person? What
Mhm.
is wrong with your self-esteem that you can't go out and be with someone who's happy?
Phew.
Right? Because obviously you have very low self-esteem if you think the best person that you can be with is a manic depressive.
God. Wow.
The problem is always in the
In
self.
our.
Yeah, the problem is
Yeah.
always in the self, right? My partner's depressed. Well, why the fuck did you choose
Mm.
a depressed partner? I mean, what is? What made you think that that was a great life choice? It's like I jumped into the pool when there was no water there. Well, that was a bit simple, right? What?
I like Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. You see, that's probably why Tom and Jerry was so fascinating to people at the beginning, was that it's an example of an abusive relationship.
It is.
There, there you go. And it's fascinating to people because they see a reflection of a lot of their own experiences in the world around about. The people being violent, people being aggressive. And if you think about where that came from, between the two world wars, etc., it makes some kind of sense there. Yeah, and it also deals with the darker side of the human element, because obviously Tom and Jerry are people; they're not really a cat and a mouse, and they're doing what other people only think about.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never studied it before, but I imagine if you go online and search like the psychology of Tom and Jerry, that there's probably a lot that has been written about it, because it makes sense in terms of the cycle of abuse, and no matter how bad one is to the other, they're inseparable.
Yeah, they are always together.
Yeah, totally dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Codependent, right? On each other.
Yeah, great. Brain.
Yeah. So we yeah. No. We it's the problem is never with the abuser. The abuser is the abuser because that's all that they know. Right? The problem is with the victim.
Why did they let that?
Yeah, absolutely. Why did the victim let it happen? Right? Why did you leave your door unlocked and all your money on the kitchen table? Right? It obviously, in hindsight, wasn't the best thing to do. So, yeah, it's an interesting point. There's a big psychological game that goes on, because the abuser wants to play the victim, and the victim wants to play the hero.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, right?
Yes, it does.
Because the abuser is like, oh, but it's not me. I'd never do anything like that. And the victim is like, yes, but then I had to tell them what was wrong, and I had to do this, and I'm the hero now. Dun dun dun. And it's like nothing could be further from the truth. And it's like, well, that's a nice picture you're painting, but it's not real.
Yeah.
And you can do that. You can paint it any way you want to paint it, but you have to parse the details of what is empirical in the situation and get beyond the words. Look at what is actually happening rather than what you are told is actually happening, which always comes down to, to me, comes down to how people describe other people, because somebody will say, that person's really great, or that person's really, and it's like, that's just an attempt to influence, rather than
it is.
Let people.
You have to spend time with the person to know them.
Yeah.
And then you will then you will make your own picture, which is.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when you realize
No.
that you have to turn to all the people around about you and say, "Excuse me, do you mind if I make up my own mind?" It's okay. I can think for myself, right? I don't.
Yeah.
I'll work it out. It's interesting, and then if you can take that. This is a final point. You can take that a little step further, and you can once you realize that almost all interaction is an attempt to influence, and then you can be comfortable with the state of saying, well, look at this. Isn't this interesting? You have this opinion about this, probably based on your experience, and I have this opinion about this. Hmm. We don't need to argue about who is right and who is wrong, obviously, from your experience. You know, this tells you that you're right, and from my experience, this tells me that I'm right. Oh, well, that's. And if we could just let it go, right?
Yeah.
World becomes a better place, and how many thousands of conflicts are avoided on a daily basis if we're if we're able to stop it before it happens by just you know stepping back from everything and realizing that realizing that we can all make our own decisions about it.